giant yucca to bloom, so that's why this 35-footer is pretty unusual in a private garden. But wait till you meet the gardener who planted it, Ruth Bancroft. Come on, I'll introduce you. Ruth, thank you so much for letting me come and see your garden today. You are quite prolific. I cannot believe the amount of different kinds of plants you have.
Well, I started the garden 32 years ago, I guess, and I just keep adding and adding, and things die, and I put in new things, and all of a sudden there are a lot of plants here.
How would you categorize it? Would you say it's a plant addiction, or?
Definitely, definitely. I have no resistance. I've learned a lot too while I was working with them and finding what could take our cold winters, for instance, and what needs sun and a little shade, and all those things. You really have to learn from experience, because no books will tell you about this, because none could apply to every garden. So you just have to learn your own garden.
What's the most important thing you've learned in your lifelong gardening?
That you can't know it all.
Yeah.
There's always something more, and people differ in their advice because they have different circumstances, and you just have to figure out what's good for yourself.
So Ruth, one thing I'm fascinated by as a gardener is when you started doing this back in the 50s, nobody else really did this kind of gardening, and especially on the large scale. Where did you learn? Where did you go for information?
I looked at this vast, flat, empty expanse, and I didn't know how to tackle it. So I had Lester Hawkins come and design the layout. But he said he didn't know anything about cactus and succulents, so all the planting I designed.
Tell me what you have learned about maybe agave and yucca that really fascinates you.
Well, for one thing, in the agaves, I think it's the variation in the different varieties, because they go from tiny things like this to huge plants, and there are hundreds of varieties. So that's an interesting subject to tackle. Mm-hmm. I got interested in yuccas long before one could even buy more than one or two varieties. I don't know why, I just liked them. So every time I'd see one available, I'd buy it and put it in the garden.
When I look around your garden and I see all the different kind of cacti and agave and yucca, I think there's a lot of prickly stuff out there.
Yes, there is.
And you've got the wounds to show for it?
Yes, yeah. But I do pretty well avoiding them, but when there are weeds under there, sometimes this happens. My husband told me that I didn't like anything that wasn't prickly.
And you've got the battle scars to prove it. Yeah. Are there any rules for garden design that you've tried to stick to?
No, it mostly depends on what plants I have. I buy what I like, and then what I have I try to fit in somewhere, which is backwards of how you should do it.
I'm seeing a theme here. And that is, if I like it, I do it.
Yes.
It is to please your eye,
yes,
because it's
is.
Your garden.
Yes, it is.
And maybe that's what we should do too.
Well, I don't see any point in having someone else design a garden with plants you don't care about.
Do you take a lot of pride in what it looks like and seeing other people enjoy it?
Well, I like to have them enjoy it if they're going to bother to come here.
Do you hear some of their comments? Maybe they don't know who you are and you sneak up behind them?
Some years ago, there was a garden club here, and I heard the woman in front of me say to her friend, "Well, what do you think of it?" And she said, "Well, it depends on what you like."
You, out!
So not everyone likes it, definitely.
And how do you think it looks now? Do you like it?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Every time I come out, I see a different light on something, or, of course, I'm always looking for problems. But I really enjoy it.
What a lovely entrance.
It's a fabulous entrance. Her husband built this for her in the 70s. It's Ruth's Folly.
This is Tom Bassett. He is a landscape architect and he's also on the board of directors of Ruth Bancroft's garden. When you walk out here and see this gorgeous expanse, Tom, what do you think?
Well, every time I come in here, I'm in awe. It's one of the finest gardens in the world. It's not just a collection of plants. It's beautifully laid out.
What do you think about the layout, at knowing what you know?
Well, there were two people responsible. Lester Hawkins laid out the paths and the beds for Ruth. And they're brilliant in their layout, in that you can go off in one direction or another direction, but you always seem to, no matter how lost you think you are, you always seem to end up back where you started, and then you notice another place that you missed, and you go there.
Did she lay out the plants so that it would draw your eye and your walk in that direction?
Yeah, Ruth laid out all the plants. She has assistants here who work with her, but Ruth really is responsible for laying out the plants. And there might be a tree over here, or a water feature over there, or a flower or a fruit or something that draws you into the next space.
Brian Kimmel is the curator at Ruth Bancroft's garden. Brian, I am seeing things I don't even recognize.
Well, quite so. These plants right here are agaves, and this particular one, Agave Salmiana variety Ferox, is a particularly large one. But there are other small agaves that you could cup in the palm of your hand, so they come in a great range of sizes and are useful for gardeners who have large spaces as well as small ones.
Well, Ruth really likes agaves and yuccas, and do those come in all different shapes and sizes?
Yes, they do. This big one behind us here, Yucca elephantipes, is one of the largest ones. You can see the white flowers on it. They do all have white flowers, but they also come in very small sizes as well.
All right, I think of agaves and yuccas as sort of in the cactus family. Do you need to live in the desert to grow them?
No, you don't. In fact, homes in New England often have a yucca as a centerpiece in their garden, so they can take very snowy conditions.
So they'll take a freeze?
They sure will.
So there are a lot of uses. Little prickly, hard to weed around, but the flowers?
The flowers are spectacular and they make it all worthwhile.
After seeing this garden, I think I've discovered a couple of the secrets to Ruth Bancroft's gardening success and her longevity. In a society that rewards instant gratification, Ruth Bancroft thinks nothing of waiting 20 years to see her first giant yucca bloom.
These fuchsia blossoms remind me of earrings. Aren't they pretty? But some gardeners think they look like little ballerinas or flower fairies as they dance and they sway in the late summer breeze. Now, delicate for sure, but with a little extra protection against the winter cold, hardy fuchsia will thrive and blossom just about anywhere. Ron Monnier knows a lot about fuchsias. He's from Monnier Country Garden. Thanks for being with us today, Ron.
It's good to be here.
Tell me why fuchsia makes such a great garden plant.
They're a plant that comes out of the ground in the spring with in a variety of colors, leaf foliage color and foliage shape. They come in a variety of sizes, small plants, large plants. But not only that, but you have a wide range of blossom color and blossom size. They start blooming early in the spring and will bloom all summer and into the fall.
And if you're looking for a specific color, you'll find it, because how many varieties are there?
There's 17,500 known varieties, and we have 1,200 of them collected in our collection right now.
Oh, that is amazing. We know why we love them, because they're just so beautiful and they come in an array of colors. But they have a reputation for having a tough time dealing with the cold.
Fuchsias are herbaceous perennials. That means that when it freezes, the plants will freeze back to the ground, but they do come back out of the ground, given some strategies like mulching to keep the crown of the plant from freezing.
And those are just the hardy fuchsias that will come back, or what about the fuchsias that I have in my hanging basket?
Hanging basket would be a difficult one to keep from freezing outside. If you're in a freezing climate, you want to take it in and have it protected in a garage or someplace like that.
And then what about when you take the fuchsia out of the garage in springtime? How do you get it to kind of bounce back and give it life? Because sometimes mine look a little wimpy.
It's really important to cut the plant back. Fuchsias respond really well to cutting them back. Refreshing the soil is really important. Most people will take it out of the pot, take about half of the soil off, refresh the soil. But most important is when they come out of garage in the spring that they need to be fed, and they're very heavy feeders.
What do they like?
There's different sources of fertilizer. The liquid fertilizers, just following the directions, or any of the slow release kinds of fertilizer.
Ron, if you feed everything and it grows perfectly, then of course you have to prune. So when is the best time to do that?
Well, you know, it's been a raging debate at our house. My dear bride Debbie doesn't like those ugly dead sticks after the first frost.
Can't stand them.
Can't stand them, so she likes to prune them in the fall. I've always been of the opinion that there's energy in those stems and you can't cut them back until spring. And so I cut mine back in the spring. But you know, after 12 years of growing the fuchsias, we can't tell the difference whether they're fall pruned or spring pruned. So it really doesn't matter. If you're in an area where you don't get a frost or a freeze, fuchsias really bloom better on new wood than old wood, and so it's probably even where they haven't frozen back to cut them back at least 50%.
So you cut them back to where you see the live tissue and green tissue then?
That's correct.
Ron, in the springtime, my hardy fuchsias look dead, and it's easy to think they need to be pulled out, but don't do that, right?
No, remember they are herbaceous perennials. They freeze down to the ground or just lose their leaves in the wintertime. Watch for that new growth at the base of the stems, and when you're pruning back, cut it back until you see that green growth, and don't give up on them.
What about pests? What do we look out for?
What you want to look out for is just any of the common garden pests, aphids, whitefly. Fuchsias are prone to fuchsia rust, but usually doesn't show up until the fall anyway, and about the time that the leaves are going to fall off the plant, and so it's really not that much of a problem.
Now, we talked about the cold, but a lot of fuchsias don't like being out in the direct sunlight either.